Okay, I am here talking to my dad. Um, this is my final exam project about echoes over time and connecting different ideas and what I took most out of this course. I decided to focus in on issues of unity and disunity and like individual rights versus social rights in China throughout the years. Um, China, ever since the legendary Xia dynasty with the three ancient rulers, Yao, Shun, and Yu, they they were all about benevolence. They each had their own different distinct qualities that made them a great ruler. But what they all had in common is they all had benevolence, like they were benevolent leaders, and the people wanted to follow them. And their main goal wasn't to be not fair, but their main objective was to have a harmonious society and a harmonious empire to rule over. And they did this. They were more about harmony within the state than like America today is all about individual rights and how like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom like property rights, personal property, and all that. But Chinese were they didn't for the 3,500-year empire till present day. They were all for until wave 5. They were pretty much only about state rights and or not state rights. They wanted state harmony. It didn't really the individual didn't matter as long as the state as a whole was harmonious. So that was with Confucian and the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty, where Confucius was before the Warring States period. And the Warring States period was a loss of Ren, which is basically like co-humanity and relationships. I don't really know when exactly Ren came to be, like the ideology of it. It was definitely in the early Chinese history. And like the root of Ren, the root of humanity that's what they call it, is Ren, but it's also about filial piety and conduct towards your family. Thanks, Dad. It's also about, but this could be like a government running, like political harmony as well, because if there's respect between everyone, then there will be harmony, and there's no like today private property, one has a better house than the other. They at the time they were all just peasants. They were all peasants that may or may not have been educated depending on the ruler. 95% of it was illiterate for most of its history because it was all peasants. But it's just this whole idea of Ren, and this kind of connects to commercial values versus commercial values versus what you need and what you want. So China for the longest time had all that they really needed. For the longest time they thought they were the only empire or civilization in the world. They didn't know there was Europe and Native Americans and all these other places. So when finally, that's the whole geography destiny thing, they're separated by the Taklamakan Desert and the Gobi Desert, and they have the Himalayas and the sea, like they're totally isolated. So when contact finally does arrive in about wave 4, I believe, Ricky and the I don't know if I said that right. Jesuits, yes. And when they arrived, they came in like not guns blazing, but they pretty much were like, look at Christianity, woo, you must convert, look at how awesome it is. If you don't pay your respects to God, you go to hell, but so you need to convert, it's fine. And so when that happened, of course, China, and they first went in through Japan. So when they heard, when the Japanese and Chinese heard that there was eternal hell for those who did not worship God, and this is the first time they'd ever heard of God, and all their ancestors before them, filial piety coming into play again, they were terrified. It was just too much for them to accept. They're like, I don't want my ancestors, my father, my grandfather, etc. before me. I don't want to think of them burning in hell for the rest of eternity. Like, they honor their ancestors. They think that in the Shang dynasty, they thought he was with Shangdi, the high god. So, I think that's interesting. And the whole commercial values, going back to that, it's what you have and what you want. So during the Ming voyages in Wave 3, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here, I'm sorry. The Ming dynasty, that was Emperor Yongle, if I'm not mistaken, who ruled at that time. And you've heard of Columbus, but have you heard of Zheng He? No?
No.
Not many people have. But Christopher Columbus looks like a joke compared to him. It was about 70 years before Columbus set out with 3 boats. Zheng He was in charge of 300 plus boats, each spanning about 150 to 200 feet long, bow to stern. Their treasure ships held things from, like, tons of cargo, things from giraffes and animals to water, like fresh water, and it was just amazing. And they had this really tight formation. If Columbus went around a bend and saw the Ming fleet, he would have wet his pants. Like, honestly,
That's not a great mental picture.
Sorry, but it's true. And to think, like, they weren't voyages of conquest. They were just, Yongle was
an explorer.
He was an explorer, yeah. He wanted to get to know he wanted to trade and things with other countries, but honestly, he was one of the very few people at that time, I think, that was concerned with the outside world, because it says here in our Ming Voyages packet, Age of Exploration, Ming and European Voyages, that China's interest in the outside world seemed to end abruptly with the death of Yongle Emperor in 1424. So once the emperor wasn't ordering the fleets, they all came home, and China had everything they needed. They all came back home, and they didn't want to trade with anyone else. Like, we saw how well that worked with the Opium War in the Qing, 100 years later, or whatever it was. There were 2 Opium Wars, actually. Europeans wanted all China had to offer, and China originally didn't want that. Emperor Kangxi was reluctant to have the Westerners open the gates and have China or foreign countries enter China. But once he did, they had silk, which was very valuable. That was their main
Export.
Thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. That's why I have you. Thank you, Daddy. But, lost my train of thought. Okay,
Silk exports.
Silk exports. So, China didn't need anything else. They had everything they wanted at that time. So then, what Europeans did the responsible thing, what any European would do in that situation. They got them addicted to drugs, so that they had it available to them. So, and China had never seen it before. So they got them addicted so that they would want more opium and therefore trade more silk, and they'd get the trade moving and booming. So they got rid of that during Mao's reign, right after the Qing dynasty. When Mao entered the equation, he got rid of prostitution, opium addiction within 3 years, something the Qing dynasty couldn't do in 30, 40 years. So I just find that amazing. He just using rehab centers and having a benevolent ruler. Like, that's something that Mao...
Benevolent dictator.
That's one way to look at it. But the emperor, the first emperor of the Han dynasty, Liu Bang, I'm sorry, I just keep talking and I find all these connections. So, Liu Bang and Mao were both peasants. China wasn't a democracy until the PRC, which was during Deng's rule, so that comes later. But they were both peasants that became very popular and had the people's support, and therefore were not elected to rule, but they came across.
A cult of personality, perhaps.
Transforming virtue, maybe, as well.
Very good.
But, so, it just keeps coming back, like, Deng, he had the whole democracy, I have 10 to 20 minutes, I can talk if I want to, don't, okay, I'm already at 10 minutes and 45 seconds, but
it's not about quantity,
it's about quality.
Yes.
Okay, but going back to the whole issues of unity and disunity, it's that each emperor, if you study history in detail, you will see that they all come back to the rights of the individual do not matter as much the societal harmony as a whole and like the strength of the empire as a whole. Like during Deng's rule, he had the democracy wall. He put a wall telling people to put not constructive criticisms but their comments on it. And then one person went along and ruined it and put something about democracy and supporting democracy. And so Deng took the wall down, saying that's too far. And he thinks that, it's fine if, like, people under my reign can do whatever they want until it threatens the harmony of the empire. So, that when people started getting greedy with the individual rights, that's when things had to stop. So I think I've made my point, but yeah, I'm gonna miss this course actually. It was a lot of work, but
me too.
it was worth it. I got a different perspective of a great and enriching history.